it's Rebecca, and today I'm going to be sharing my picks for the spooky season. I've chosen 3 books that I want to read for this spooky Halloween season, and all 3 I've never read before, and I'm really excited. I'm going to introduce the 3 books that I chose and talk about why I chose them, and then once I've read them, I will kind of record myself giving a reaction and talking about my thoughts and what I liked and what I didn't like about the books, and I'm hoping they're all really good reads for me. The first book I chose is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. And I've never read any Angela Carter, but this is a story collection, and I think it's one of her most popular books. So I think it's a good place to start. The intro to the little blurb at the beginning of this edition says Angela Carter was a storytelling sorceress, and that these stories are in them she spins subversively dark and sensual versions of familiar fairy tales and legends like Little Red Riding Hood and Bluebeard and Puss in Boots, Beauty and the Beast. Says giving them exhilarating new life in a style steeped in the romantic trappings of the Gothic tradition. I like kind of that twist and darkness to common tales and fables. I think that sounds really interesting, and I love the Gothic genre, so I think this is a great pick. I'm really excited about it. I did start the first story, which is the title of this collection, The Bloody Chamber. I started it this morning. I haven't finished it yet, but I really like it. I'm super intrigued. It immediately sets up kind of a mystery and immediate suspicions about everybody in the book. So or everybody in the story. So I'm excited. It's starting out well for me. Once I'm finished with that, I'm going to read the classic Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I have never had to read this. It's never been assigned to me, but I know it's a lot of readers' favorite classics. I've heard really good things. I know it's an impressive story. I read a book last year, a book of essays by Rebecca Solnit. I think the collection was called The Faraway Nearby. But in it, she talks about the story of Frankenstein and how it is a story within a story. And I'm really intrigued by that format. So the version I got is the one, I realized after getting it, this version has edits to it. So this is the version, which is the 3rd edition. And I know that the original she wrote in 1818. I'm sure there's a large group of people that prefer the original text, but this is the one I have, and so I'm going to read this one. I think this is probably the one that's assigned most in class and in school. So I'm sure a lot of people have read this one too, and I think it has notes on what's been changed from the original to this one. So I'm interested to see, maybe it will be an interesting study to read this one and then at a later point read the original to compare the two. But looking forward to it. Finally, I'm going to read The Sundial by Shirley Jackson. And honestly, don't know much about it, but I love Shirley Jackson. So I have high hopes. I got this last time I was at this bookstore looking specifically in their used book section, and I had planned to just pick up anything that they had by Shirley Jackson because at this point only read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which is, I've reread it now several times, and I've read The Haunting of Hill House, and I read The Lottery, and I think a few other of her short stories. And so that's it. And so I've been wanting to read some more of her offerings, and I actually hadn't heard of this one until I was at the store, at the bookstore, and so interested. The back says, before there was Hill House, there was the Halloran mansion of Jackson's stunningly creepy fourth novel, The Sundial. When the Halloran clan gathers at the family home for a funeral, no one is surprised to see peculiar Aunt Fanny wander off into the garden, but she returns reporting an astonishing vision. Her late father has appeared to her and given the exact date of an imminent apocalypse, from which only the Hallorans and their hangers-on will be spared. Yeah, I mean, this is intriguing to me. We've got, sounds like maybe Gothic elements because of an old family home. Rumors of an apocalypse, that's also kind of right up my alley. So, I don't know, I'm very excited. I like that I'm going into this not knowing much about it. I don't have any expectations, but knowing that I enjoy her writing. Those are the 3 books. I will catch up with you once I've finished reading them. I finished The Bloody Chamber earlier this morning, and I've had some time to collect my thoughts. I think this is an excellent candidate for a spooky season read. It's very atmospheric and very evocative. The language is lush and visceral, so you get a real sense of place and atmosphere. A couple of times I got tripped up in the language and had to reread to orient myself. But overall, I enjoyed how it was written and the sentence form, and it really did create the atmosphere and gave you a sense of the characters. Where she's able to move the plots along, but also make you feel very much in the world, which was impressive for short stories. You immediately feel like you're in the place and in the setting, and then you get carried through the story. I thought it was interesting, the format and the concept of using fairy tales as the base. I was familiar, or I could recognize most of the fairy tales that were alluded to or inspired by. I guess I assume that a fairy tale or a fable would have a symbol, that they're quite symbolic or are trying to, there's a moral or some sort of warning within the stories. And so after every story, I would try to kind of figure out what Angela Carter's what she was trying to say, or what the symbolism was, or what I was supposed to take away from it. Sometimes I got it. A couple times I was like, I don't know what the take is here, or I'm not sure what she was necessarily getting at. What I took away from it, I enjoyed, and it did make me think about my relationship to fairy tales and the purpose of them. I interpreted several themes from the stories as a whole. I could kind of see some early feminist themes, obviously written by a woman in, I guess, the 70s, if I'm right. Yeah, 70s, 80s. And so I guess the concepts of feminism from that time, and also a white Eurocentric woman writing, but I could see, some early concepts there. I read or I noticed themes of the consequences or kind of a commentary on othering. There were several monsters depicted in these stories that there was kind of a sensitive or a sympathetic view on the monsters, views on what it is to be other, also themes of innocence and youth and fear, and how fear manifests in naivety and that sort of thing. The stories that stood out to me the most were the title story, The Bloody Chamber. I really, really liked that one. It's probably my favorite, and it's the one that the collection opens on, but really great. Like, if you read one from this collection, I would read The Bloody Chamber. I thought it was awesome and fun, and really was strong in the sense of kind of gothic atmosphere, and the characters were really well imagined. So I really enjoyed that one. Beyond that, I also liked the Earl King a lot. I think that one had a really strong autumnal atmosphere. So if you want just pure fall vibes, that's the one I would read. And I also liked the last story, I thought, which is Wolf Alice. I thought that one was great. So those three stood out to me the most. Overall, I really liked it. It wasn't perfect for me, but for the most part, I thought it was a great read. I'm pleased that I selected it for spooky season. Yeah, that's The Bloody Chamber. I thought it was great. Here it is one more time. Next, I'm going to be reading Frankenstein, so I'll let you know what I think when I'm done with that one. I've now finished Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I'm ready to chat about it. I actually really enjoyed it. I found it a really impressive piece of writing for someone so young to have written it. She started writing it, or the inception of the novel started when Mary Shelley was 18. And so I think the amount of creativity, how imaginative and clever it is really impressive for her age. Impressive in general, but especially for how old she was. I think it's a very thought-provoking story, and tackles some pretty big themes that I was surprised to find in the book. So yeah, overall, a solid classic, I would say. Again, I had touched on my interest in the form, and I did find it fascinating. So it is in the form, an epistolary form. So in letters, we have the initial start of the story is a letter written by this person named Walton to his sister, and he is on this great journey, or he's on this journey to as far north as he can travel, and this is a big goal for him. And then within his writing to her, he meets Dr. Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, this scientist, and then Frankenstein relates his story to Walton, and Walton documents it as he's writing these letters. So within Frankenstein's story, Frankenstein relates the story of his creature this being he has created within his story. So that's where you get that story within a story effect, which was cool. I thought it was successful and interesting. And I guess Frankenstein's story serves as a bit of a warning to Walton, I would say. I interpret it as a warning of, you know, what happens when you obsessively follow your dreams, and, what are the consequences of reaching for these goals and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. I can see why this is said to have inspired a lot of modern sci-fi. There's definitely themes of advanced technology and, the question of just because we can do something, we have the technology or the scientific knowledge to do something, what are the ethics of doing so? Just because we can, should we do certain things just because the science is there? There's definitely kind of conversations within the book about the self and human nature and how, intelligence and self-awareness is defined. All of those things considered, it's very thought-provoking, and it's not like if you're going into this for just pure like horror, there's more to it than that. I think it's very philosophical and is worked for me because I do like speculative fiction and those kind of stories that make you think. But yeah, it's very different to modern horror. I did find I would get impatient with the writing at times just because I felt some of the descriptions were too wordy, or, I wanted to go along a little bit faster. So there's a bit of that. And then I found that it was very description heavy on internal emotions and moods and thoughts. Not a lot of gory descriptions. I would say the kind of terror or the horror elements were found more atmospherically or more psychologically. So, we do have this kind of grotesque monster who's described, but the real horror comes from the anxiety, like Frankenstein's anxiety, and his grappling with regret and the fear of have I created something really horrible. I think it's a great spooky season book. Again, it's a solid classic. It's interesting to see the beginnings of sci-fi and horror genres. And so if you have any interest in that, I think Frankenstein is a really great starting point. I'm happy with it. Next up is Shirley Jackson's The Sundial. So I'll catch you up when I'm done with that one. Okay, so I have now finished The Sundial by Shirley Jackson, and it was so good. I love Shirley Jackson. I don't know if I expressed that as much in my introduction to this video, but she's definitely a favorite of mine, and it was so comforting to just read another one of her novels. So I was already had great high hopes for it, and was really looking forward to reading this. I left it for my last book just because I anticipated liking it the most, and Anyway, did not disappoint. It was really, really good. The Sundial was written earlier, before Haunting of Hill House and before We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which is her final novel. But I could definitely see themes, like similar themes she was playing with in this book, The Sundial, that would come up in Haunting and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. The characters aren't quite able to leave this house in the Sundial, and there's that kind of same theme in Haunting of Hill House, that trapped in the house feeling, and also just a theme that I noticed between the Sundial and We Have Always Lived in the Castle is that kind of wealthy family that's estranged from the village, but also connected to it. So they live in the big house overlooking the village nearby. And that's kind of the setup in the Sundial. We have the Halloran mansion and the Halloran family. There is some tension around who's going to inherit the house. The daughter of the original family, her name's Aunt Fanny, and she fears that it's going to go to her sister-in-law. Her brother's really sick, and their son has died. Aunt Fanny has a vision from her father, her deceased father, that the end of times is coming. There's going to be an apocalypse. Essentially, the whole world's going to be wiped clean and destroyed, and as long as they stay in the house, they'll be safe, is what she gathers from these visions. And at first, everyone doesn't really believe her, but soon her sister-in-law, Oriana, she kind of like takes it on as like her duty to like be the leader in this new world. She's takes Aunt Fanny seriously, and so does the rest of the household. They decide to help prepare for the end of times. It's strangely a really great kind of pandemic lockdown read, because there's this sense of like preparing to stay in the house or to stay with a certain amount of people for a undetermined amount of time. This like kind of cabin fever absurdity permeates the story, and everyone starts behaving and acting really strange because they truly believe that the world is going to end and they're going to be the only ones left. And as you read, you realize they're not great people. They're very despicable, most of them. And so, and they don't seem to care about extending what they believe the safety of their home is to the villagers. There's several characters, there's lots of characters, and at first it was overwhelming to me to keep them all straight. But as the book went along, I feel like I was able to manage it, but it is a lot. The atmosphere and kind of the scenes are built through the dialogue. The dialogue is so good. Every character has distinct ways of speaking, and it's hilarious. Like, it's funny the way she writes the dialogue. It's sardonic and snappy, and just and like gives you such a good sense of the characters. The house itself is bizarre and weird, and just described as so kind of garish and opulent. There's these gardens that remind me of Alice in Wonderland. There's like a maze and kind of just this outlandish garden area. The one thing Shirley Jackson does so well is she gives you just enough to like entice you into what's going on. And there's clearly like a mystery or what's going to happen here. She gives you just enough and then like lures you along all the way to the end of the book. It's so well done. So it's one of those where you want to keep reading because you're like, what's going on? What's happening? And so the suspense is great. There's actually a really horrific scene I found really terrifying, where one of the characters, a young woman, wants to leave the house. She's like, these people are crazy. I'm going crazy here. So she attempts to leave, and the car that's called for her to leave has this very, like, creepy man in it. And he's driving her away, but he's, like reading it was really terrifying because you didn't know what he was going to do, and I was very suspicious of him. I found the psychological elements of this book really fascinating. The philosophical elements of these people considering what it would be like after the fact. They're expecting the world to end and for them to come out on the other side of it. And what does that look like? And how do you prepare for that? I found that all very fascinating. These are very selfish, very single-minded people. They're not considering much. They're people that have been waited on hand and foot their whole life. Servants, people take care of them, and they're starting to grapple with like, okay, we're going to have to take care of ourselves. Because what I did notice from the very beginning is they never consider keeping the house staff safe or any of the villagers, like I said. So they basically decided that they're the only ones worthy to stay in the house and to come out on the other side. And yet none of them seem to really like each other. But they're agreeing to stick together through this. Anyway, that philosophy, and kind of thinking about what that's like is really interesting. So a very thought-provoking, wild, absurd novel, and the end of it really leaves you with a lot to think about. So I thought it was great. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, I'm really happy to have read the 3 books I did for spooky season. I hope if you come across this video that you've enjoyed these reviews, and hopefully one of the books piques your interest. And yeah, good luck with your spooky season reading, everybody. And I'll see you in my next video.